we in the church need to start being more intentional about dealing with this issue and not dealing with it on a superficial issue and not being afraid of it.
Shame and feeling incomplete or insignificant often leads us to seek out worldly solutions. As we spiral into isolation and harmful patterns of living, we can quickly find ourselves with addictions that we never imagined having. No one sets out to become a pornography addict, but many have found themselves caught. Unable to pull away from the explicit material, they feel forced to watch it as it consumes their thoughts and lives. This week, Gary and Bob discuss the deeper injuries to our hearts and souls that can lead to addictions like pornography. They want believers to know that we can find healing that leads to freedom. Before we begin, we want to let you know that you can receive daily biblical encouragement through emails. World Challenge offers daily devotional emails that you can sign up for at worldchallenge.org as a regular reminder of God's goodness. We would not be able to create resources like this one without generous listeners like you. Please consider donating to power the mission and make World Challenge resources like this devotional and podcast possible. Now here's our host, Bob Ditmer.
Well, Gary, we're going to be talking about a topic today that is uncomfortable, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it, and maybe that's part of the problem. It's one that needs to be talked about, and that is pornography. Are there other reasons besides lack of significance that leads to pornography, or is that kind of the primary one that you hear when you're pastoring?
The primary ones that I hear and that most people that really spend their whole careers helping people through this, there's two. The shame, which we've spoken about. There's one that's a lot less spoken of, and it surprised me when I first started studying this, and it's anger. I think the survey that they took over about 3,800 men, they found out that like 80% of them, when they viewed pornography, they looked at I don't know what to call it, but angry pornography, like aggressive, almost abusive, dominance, someone being subservient, and so they started like, well, why is so much of this directed towards, and they realized there's anger here. It's not just so if you just deal with the lust, you're not dealing with the anger, and the anger is still going to be in your heart, and therefore you're going to go back to something that tries to you get to relieve the anger or play out the anger in a and most men are they're angry and they're lustful, but they are also fearful a little bit. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to lose. Pastors don't want to lose their ministries. Most pastors say, "I don't know anything else to do," and so and so they don't want to. They don't want to have an affair. They don't want to see a prostitute. But so they feel like this is a safe way to get rid of that anger inside of them. And so again, that's dealing with the issue of anger. And so we're spending so much time hearing sermons about and reading books about and even preaching against sin in the way only in the form of repressing it, not in the way of understanding it and seeing why we sin. Where's this anger come from? So maybe trace it back to a lot of men look at pornography when their wife rejects them from an invitation to intimacy, and there's I can't believe my wife, she's so mean to me. I'm just gonna, and then they go down to the basement and look at pornography. So there's this anger. My boss just he overlooked me, and somebody else got the raise, not me. And most times we don't link it. We're frustrated. We're angry. We don't think, and then we just want some relief, and so we go to pornography. We oftentimes don't trace the connection, and so shame, anger, fear, and some of those other things that we did. That another one is entitlement. I've worked hard. I've served my family. I gave overtime at the job. I tithed and then gave to the missions program. I've done a lot, and I feel, and even after doing all that, God, I've done so much for you, and I still feel miserable, and I still feel lonely. So forget it. I'm just going to go out and have some fun, and just and then pornography becomes the means by which we escape. And there's a sense of entitlement. I deserve this. I'm giving a whole lot, but not getting anything. And there's this false sense of intimacy. I'm getting something from these people that I'm viewing on a screen, that they're giving me something, and they're not. And that just again going back to that cyclical thing, it just intensifies the loneliness, intensifies the lack of intimacy, the shame, and even the anger. I'm angry. I did. You're angry. Now you're angry at yourself. You started the day angry at your boss or your wife, and now you're angry at yourself for doing that. But you're a Christian, so you repented. So it's going to be 3 or 4 more days, and you're going to be clean and holy, and you're going to feel good about it. But that self-anger will catch up with you after the faux holiness loses its power over you, and you're back to your angry self. So you got to deal with the root, the anger, and how do you deal with how do you deal with these deeper issues of the heart? First of all, is to face them. Again, in the church, we're oftentimes told just to repress them, don't talk about them, just a quick confession, come to the altar and confess it, and then never talk about it again, never discuss it with anybody, don't talk with your wife about it, don't go to your pastor about it, don't talk about it in the men's group. And so we're coming to church with very superficial issues, talking about, it's always project-oriented. We're going to go here, we're going to do this, we're going to build that, we're going to start this, or this group's going to start, we're going to do this series, we're going to do this program, and very little of like some guy sitting around on a couch just saying, "You're hurting, tell me about it. You're struggling, what is it?" And just this sense of openness, the sense of that God has something more for us, and so, and that's the intimacy that we're looking for. It can be in marriage, yes, certainly, but it also is in community, and without that community, we won't. Community helps anger heal. It helps the sense of not belonging. If you're in superficial community, you won't feel like you belong anyway. Even if you're in community, it's real community where you do belong and others belong to you. That all of a sudden there's that sense, and that's why God created us. He says it's not good that we're alone, and that's the creation of male and female.
The church does a lot of, you've already mentioned, talking about what you should not do. Stay away from this. Put up these guardrails. Right. Do those actually, in your view, harm getting to the root of the problem? They've got to be there. I know it's a controversial question because I don't want to be suggesting forget all the guardrails, but do guardrails sometimes keep us from getting to the real problem, which just prolongs the issue?
Great question. I think it is. I think it gives us a momentarily superficial sense of control without dealing with the roots. So it's just it's like, mowing your lawn and you had a lot of weeds in it and it looks like grass a little bit because it's that. And so okay, that's acceptable. That's maybe the guardrails you're talking about. Is make sure you keep it looking good on the outside. Jesus talked about that. Clean the outside of the cup. That's not going to take care of it. It has to be the inside of the cup, and that's where the power comes from. And so, and there are some really healthy leaders in the church and some really healthy churches that are helping people. A good friend of mine another podcast we'll be hearing from him, Nate Larkin, has started this thing called the Samson Society, and it's a group of men that have gotten together and said they are so exhausted with the superficial and not dealing with their heart issues, and so tired of dealing with pornography in the secret closet and nobody knowing. And so they're talking about their drinking problems, their anger problems, their lust problems, their lack of love for their children problem, and they're getting together and having these wonderful times of openness, and the amount of healing is taking place in that is phenomenal.
That's a good example. Are there some things you think the church should be doing in addition to those? Do you have some suggestions for pastors that may be listening to us today?
Yeah. I think having I think this is such a, the statistics you just we talked about at the beginning of our time together, pardon me, today, would suggest to us without doubt that we in the church need to start being more intentional about dealing with this issue and not dealing with it on a superficial issue and not being afraid of it. Like some people, are, there's certain words that seem like those you can't even say the word pornography in the church, so a pastor can't preach about it. Or it's seen as a few men that kind of wear cloak and jacket and they hats and sunglasses and they walk into pornography shops. It's like maybe it used to be like that, but it's not now. It's so pervasive and it's so available in every home, on every telephone. So many teenagers are dealing with this. We're going to have to get honest with it. We're going to have to stop stigmatizing it as that sin. So it's totally fine for a pastor to be full of arrogance and pride and selfishness, and almost applauded, like, man, he's leading us into great things. But if we talk about pornography, it's like, ooh, that's shameful. That's a secret thing that nobody should talk about. So we have to talk about it. We have to have groups. I believe, again, like Samson Society, or other ones. Type of Celebrate Recovery is another one Rick Warren started. These things where you start getting a little more honest. Wild at heart type of thing. John Eldredge, he speaks of these issues of men dealing with the issues of the heart, the longings, getting to the core. But a lot of it is starts with self-work. So a man's not going to go to a group, or a woman, or not going to go to a counselor or a pastor unless first they're doing some self-work. So realizing that they have a problem. That pornography is both a sin and an addiction, and those two things are differentiated. I believe that sin is the thing that happens. We talked a little bit about that. So in pornography, I'm sinning against I'm actually, in a strange way, I'm sinning against the woman who is having to make her living to do something so degrading. I'm sinning against my wife, because the intimacy I give to somebody else, false intimacy, is taking away from the intimacy of that. I'm sinning against my children because I'm a man who now has secret shame and undealt with anger, and increasing it by looking at pornography. So I'm doing that. I'm sinning against my church, my community, my job. Everybody is being negatively affected by my sin. And so I have to deal with my sin, and God hates that because he sees how much it's hurting the people around me. So he rebukes my sin, and he disciplines me for my sin, and rightfully so. But many of us are only dealing with the sin and not the addiction. See, God cares about the addiction as well. He hates the sin, but he cares about the addiction. And his care for the addiction is to say, I understand that your broken heart. I understand the woundedness. I understand the cry of your heart for intimacy and longing, and it breaks his heart that we're looking for that thing in the wrong places. And so he wants to deal with the heart of the addict that says, okay, I want to help you not only with the fruit of your sin, but the root of your sin, and the woundedness that is driving you to this. So you were abandoned as a child, and now you're looking for love. A lot of certain types of pornography they find comes from being sexually abused as a child, and that plays out in certain types of pornography as well, and heavy addictions, and maybe even a lot of sexual acting out sinfully. It comes from that. I'm not saying that. And again, so you wouldn't excuse the sin. Okay, they need to look at the sin, but there's a reason maybe for it. Not an excuse for it, but a driver for it that is from this woundedness, and that's where God wants to. He also wants to forgive the sin, and that's usually where we stop. Oh, forgive me, I shouldn't do it again. I promise I'll never do it again. I'm going to read my Bible 3 times a day now, and I'm going to fast. And so we deal with the sin, but we're not actually dealing with the heart addiction. And that's the goodness of God, is that he deals with both. And so, but I believe that's, to get more back to your question, it starts with yourself. You're realizing you have a problem. You're realizing it's deeper. You're starting to find out why I'm angry. Why does this lust come from? Why am I lonely? And then you're starting to even deal with it, not by just putting a covenant eyes type thing on your computer, but you're dealing with the heart issue as well, because you can put a block on your computer and then get it on your phone, or you can go into a store, find magazines, and so you're going to find it if it's in your heart. And so the other things can be helpful, the accountability partners and the blocks and the people that have access to what you're watching on your computer, but those can tend to be superficial if the man's heart is not dealing with the addictive nature that he's having, and dealing with it. And it comes down to being hurt and shamed and wounded, it's easier to. I don't want to deal with painful things. I want to be happy. So I'll be a lot happier if I just look at some pornography than I am having to spend a day alone with God, just saying, God, my heart is breaking and my heart is hurt. I feel so worthless. I feel so abandoned. And then God started asking you questions. Why do you feel abandoned? Well, Lord, it started when I was a little boy. It's like, can you tell me about it? It's like, yeah, well, you remember when my dad started hitting me, and then he was beating my mom, and I just ran to the closet, and you start remembering these things, and it's painful. And so, and again, we need help along this way. That's where I think Christian counseling is important, to get some help in this realm, and that can really change. So that's what it was for me. After a good number of years, in my mid-30s, I started looking inside the heart and the freedom, and there was a change. It wasn't that bootstrapping it, like, I'm going to grit my teeth and not look at pornography, and I can make it 6 months. This one was like, man, I'd forgotten that I liked that stuff. I've forgotten to look at it. It's almost nice, or it didn't become my default when I was. If I did become lonely, my default became, let me call a few friends and let's go have a nice meal together, or let me call my best friend and tell him, like, I'm kind of lonely. I'm feeling, that sort of is it nip in the bud? Is that?
Yeah, you're nipping it in the bud.
I was going to say that, and it sounded weird, nipping in the bud. So it kind of nips in the bud, because once you get, how I think, I can't speak for women, but men, there's like not to get too weird, but there's like a sequence, like a rocket launcher, and once you get to T-3 or whatever, you're going to take off. You're going to go into pornography and masturbation or whatever, sexual sin. So if you can stop it earlier, like, okay, I'm starting to feel angry, I'm starting to feel lonely, I'm starting to feel worried about my future, and then community is built for that. You're talking to somebody, and then there's real intimacy comes into your heart, and out of that real intimacy comes like, oh, okay, the power of that sin just doesn't have the same kind of power anymore. What Satan has tried to put up as a false view of intimacy, it no longer has the same kind of attraction. It still takes discipline. You could go like, it's still a little attractive, but it's not as powerful.
So we've talked about its pervasiveness, how many people it affects. We've talked about how hard it is to get over. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying you can have victory over it.
Absolutely.
Because there are some people out there that think this is just with me forever. I'm just not going to worry about it anymore.
Yeah. The majority of people, it's not like certain addictions are short-lived. Like in our work with Teen Challenge, the drug rehab program, you can't, not too many people live 30, 40 years as a crystal meth user or heroin injector. It kills them, or even alcohol. Usually the liver shuts down and stuff like that, a heavy drinker. So those tend to be like, man, I'm 30 and I'm still using drugs. I got to get some help. Yeah. Whereas pornography, you can be 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And nobody wants to wait until you have no testosterone. Nobody wants to wait until like, hey, I'm healed. Like, well, you're 75 and you don't think about sex anymore. No wonder you're healed. That's not what God wants. He wants us to, He wants us to be healed in our 20s. He wants us to be healed, when we first go to it, or He wants us to be prepared even, as the Christian community prepares young people, because now these things are starting, 10, 12 years old. People are getting involved in sexting and all kinds of horrible things and so preparing this next generation to be free from this from the get-go. Like, they don't need to get free from it later. They
conquered it early.
They conquered it early. Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of good resources during the program. You mentioned another one, Unwanted, is another book that
Unwanted by Jay Stringer. Yeah. He studied, I think it was about 3,800 men and women, and he started finding out the whys, the reasons of this, and phenomenal insight into the human heart, into the soul of the why. And he's the one who, him and some others began to a little more graphic than we could get into today, but he began to ask, like, what type of thing do you look at when you look at pornography? And they categorized it, and they found out, okay, angry men look at this, fearful men look at this, women who have been abused look at that, and it was like, 99% accurate or something like that. It's just like he could actually ask you what happened in your past and tell you what kind of pornography you look at. And so he made a link, not just generally to pornography, but to the purpose of pornography, what it is that we're actually looking at. And so like, and some very interesting studies. Like, here's one that I found extremely interesting. When Cleveland Cavaliers were playing the Golden State Warriors in Game 7 of the final, Google Analytics studied both cities and found out that, I think it was, don't quote me on the numbers, but let's say about 25% a drop in views of pornographic sites in both those cities. Okay, so Golden State wins, and that 25% stays low. It only shoots up about 5%, so about 5% of men went back to after their win. Mm-hmm. What do you think happened in Cleveland?
It shot up.
Shot up.
Yeah.
Like not only went back to its normal use, but went another 25% above its normal use.
Disappointment.
Again, disappointment, anger, frustration, and so
it was an escape from their loss, right?
Yeah, doesn't that clearly speak that it's not just an issue of wanting something sexual? It's a soul issue. It's a hurt issue, and so pornography is not a sexual sin. Pornography is a sin against sex. And there's a real difference there because, unfortunately, we make sexuality sometimes in the church seem to be a bad thing. That's why we can't say certain kind of words in the church. Can't even say pornography, or masturbation, because it's like, oh, that's you can't talk about those things, and so it just makes it more shameful. But those things are. The sex is not bad. God created sex, and it's meant to be good, and it's in the marriage, and so to bless that and to speak well of that and to provoke good things out of that, but then see this as an anomaly. That's not the norm. It's against. It's not a form of sex. Like pornography is not a form of sex. Prostitution or masturbation, that's not a form of sex. It's against sex. It's against what God created it to be, and that's why it causes that much more shame and feeling of defeat, and that. Just like the Cleveland Cavaliers, when their team was defeated, they went to that. When we feel defeated personally in relationships, on our job, even spiritually, we feel like I'm not living up to God's standards. It can drive us to that thing. And so getting to that sense of, there's certain words in the Bible that are the counter empowerment. It counters the power of sinning against sex. And there are words that we don't think really are the words that would be like, what kind of words would set you free? Well, these words that the Bible so covets that we have, and the Spirit the Bible says the Spirit lusts after these things. He wants to use such a powerful word because he knows it's going to be a counter for this false lust, false sexual intimacy, and these are words like joy. In my counseling, I've never counseled a man or woman who came into my office and said, I've just got so much joy and peace and contentment, and I'm just delighted in the Lord, and I have really strong relationships. All that's going good, but I'm struggling with pornography. Never once. It's always been like, I'm struggling with pornography. Why? Well, because I'm miserable. I'm sad. My job has no meaning. There's no purpose in my life. That was another one that Jay Stringer found out, that it was like the number one indicator of somebody who would be addicted to pornography was, and we talked about some of them, anger and things like that, but the number one, according to him, was purposelessness, that a man who didn't have a sense of purpose. He might have had a job, but it's not a job he loves, and he's not living for the thing that God created him for. There's going to be a sense of meaninglessness, and that will drive you to that as well. So there's all kinds of reasons, but getting, it's one thing to say I'm going to stop doing this, but it'd be another thing to say I'm going to start increasing this instead of repressing something. Like, stop looking at pornography. How about we increase the sense of I'm coming to the Lord for joy. I'm coming to community for life. I'm coming to the family of God for a sense of belonging. I'm coming to my wife for true intimacy. I'm coming to my husband for a real partnership, and getting those things so you have the fruit of the Spirit is really what it is. So you have peace, joy, patience, kindness, goodness, long-suffering.
Yeah. All addictions need to be replaced with something else, and sadly it's usually another addiction, right? So it's something good has to fill that void.
That's right, yeah. And that's, you can see that, right? The difference in strategy. I'm going to stop this. How am I going to stop this? Or maybe it's, well, no, I'm going to start this. I'm going to start being truly intimate with people and truly vulnerable with people. And you'll find that there's a replacement, like the old song, turn your eyes on Jesus, and the things of this world will go strangely dim. And oftentimes our focus is I got to make that dim. It's such a bright light in my life. How do I make that dim? Well, that song is so powerful because you're turning your eyes to Jesus, and the things of the world grow dim because the things of Jesus grow light, which is love and community and grace and forgiveness and self-acceptance, even that agape of self that we've talked about here before.
To find freedom from addiction, we must first allow God to heal the wounds in our hearts. With our Heavenly Father's power and the help of community, we will find restoration and new life. God did not save us so that sin could rule over us. He will set us free. The Gary Wilkerson Podcast is brought to you by World Challenge. Sound design for this episode by Mike Hall-Smith. This episode was written by Rachel Schmitz. Our producer is Chris Wigington, with video production by Aaron Gale. World Challenge is incredibly thankful for the support we receive from many people across the country who believe in our mission. We are able to continue creating resources like this podcast because of donations from listeners like you. We hope you tune in next week to the Gary Wilkerson Podcast for more encouragement in your Christian walk. Until then, do all you can to live a better life and make a better world through Jesus Christ.